Today I have the special opportunity to show you the new COMAN M1 Pro V5 with its fluid head and monopod, which are two things that I've never used in this style of a combination. And it has a really cool trick up its sleeve, and that is you can extend it basically with just one hand, and then the foot just slides out and you can stand it as tall as 1.75 meters. This is a seriously large monopod, and with the ability to literally adjust it with just one hand, it's unheard of. I've seen some that combine some twisting motion that can do that with just one part moving, but this is really, really cool. Just like that, you make your adjustments and you're already done. Before I jump in fully, a quick disclaimer. COMAN sent this unit out to me for the purpose of making this review a couple of weeks ago. They have no say in this video and I'm not getting paid to make this video. However, I do get to keep this product. Another important note is that I'm assuming that this is a pre-production unit and I don't know how the full-on production units will be once you get them through the Kickstarter campaign. This is a Kickstarter product as it stands right now. The company COMAN has brought to market multiple other products, and I'm assuming that they are capable of handling this as well. But with the nature of this being a Kickstarter project, you have to note that Kickstarter projects can change in timeline, scope, as well as final product. I personally have been part of multiple Kickstarter projects as a customer, some of which had perfect delivery, some of which had delayed delivery, and the product might have changed in between. But you have to be aware of that before backing the project. Now, with this out of the way, let's jump back into the video. I want to show you some of the really nifty features of this set that might be interesting for you. Number one, like I said, you can adjust it basically with one hand. Be careful not to have your foot underneath because it can be rather heavy, and when it falls directly on your foot, it can hurt. I've tested that when I first unboxed this. It was kind of unexpected for me. Now, some of the things that are really cool here is you can see the camera technically stands by itself. Now, one thing to point out, of course, the feet on the bottom, they have a 19 centimeter diameter when you draw a circle around that. So it is rather solid, and it also locks in the center, so it technically stands vertical in the center. However, I would not leave this unattended if you are outdoors, specifically because you have the wind that might tip it over. And of course, also if you have a bigger rig on top that might be front heavy, back heavy, side heavy, then of course that is a bigger problem and something to be aware of. The feet definitely help just having it stable like this, and you have a certain amount of control over it. And of course, more safety in comparison to a regular monopod. That has always been a big bummer for me. Of course, I have monopods that are kind of part of my tripods. I can take off one of the legs and turn it into a monopod, but they never have these type of tripod feet at the bottom, which makes it that I don't really use them that much. Now with this, on the other hand, I can, if I want to, have it stand on its own. And especially when you have it on the lowest position, it is rather stable. Now, the other thing though, when you don't want to just have it at the center position, you actually also want to move around and just use the added stability of this monopod. They have a little bit of a lever here at the bottom that basically has two positions. So you just step on it and then let it up again. It unlocks and it gives you the flexibility and freedom to basically move this around, turn the head, and take your shots like that, lean around, and when you adjust the camera to your eye level, you can actually kind of work with that. Now this is really nice, but the really nice thing is that they actually made it so that there's also an adjustment at the bottom here where you can basically adjust how stiff the movement is supposed to be. So now I made it all the way at the top, and it is significantly harder to adjust. Now, as you can see, it kind of stays in the position and then starts sliding. This is not the case. If you open this up fully, then it's a really nice movement. And if I leave the camera in one of these positions, you can see it just falls and basically gives you full flexibility and being able to make these adjustments more freely with less dampening. And when you want to bring it back to the center, you just click the foot thing again, let it come up. Now you can still move it, but once you get to the center position, it kind of locks in place. It's not an audible click or something, but you can notice you can't really get around anymore. It has a much more limited range, or rather almost no range. Like I said, I wouldn't leave this on a wedding reception or something and just standing like this without myself being close to it, but it is centered and you can take your hands off without it immediately falling over. Now, while I'm already talking about the foot, I want to give you a couple more details about this. Now, you have a 19 centimeter diameter, as I've mentioned before, and you have these feet that you can, of course, flip up for transportation, and you have a plastic cap right here in the bottom which prevents you from scratching any wood surfaces or something like that when you're indoors and you don't want to use the feet. You can also take this plastic cap up, and then they have a metal spike that you can place in the bottom right here. Something to note here, however, is this spike is very nice when you are in an outdoorsy area. You want to have full stability, you want to kind of like use this in a snowy environment or a muddy environment, then this is great. However, something to note is that you can't use it as a means of always having it on and then going from outdoors to indoors, because the spike protrudes a little bit further than the legs as they are open. So if I were to put this on the ground right here, it will still stand on the spike instead of the tripod legs. That is an important distinction right here. Of course, you can kind of protect the legs or use this in a pinch, just closing down the legs and then using the rubber feet as your protection for that just one moment kind of situation. But generally speaking, I think the spike is something that you would only use if you're planning to be outdoors and you need that extra stability and fixture. Now, I will come back to the foot in just a moment, but I also, of course, need to talk about the top of the tripod, which is the second part of this invention or this combination of a product that COMAN has built together here. And of course, in this case, it is the fluid head. They do have different combinations of this COMAN M1 tripod with the fluid head and the feet and the middle rod. So there are different things that are best for certain types of people. Now, in my case, they shipped the Pro version here, and this includes the fluid head, which has the fluid adjustments as well as the kind of like the videographer's adjustment rod right here. And I must say, like, I used a fluid head about, I don't know, 25 years ago. My cousin was doing film school at the time, and I was able to kind of like get to know what a fluid head was. But I honestly turned more toward photography and videography in the studio, and of course travel, which had me consider more the types of ball heads, simply because they have a 1 point of adjustment and they're considerably lighter in comparison to something like a fluid head. And I now fully understand why fluid heads are a thing, why you would want to have a fluid head, especially when you are into videography and you want to get a smooth shot and you want to do those movements with the ease that comes with a dampened fluid head. That was something that is completely crazy that I never really got into this. Now, considering this specific fluid head, it has, of course, the 2 points of adjustments. So you have the bottom adjustment right here for the rotation. It's not as adjustable as the top in terms of its dampening. You can kind of mostly just lock it in place and then loosen it. And you can try to kind of like have it a little bit loose, but it's really not made for adjustment in terms of like actually being able to dampen the axis of rotation. The other axis here, you can actually kind of like play around with this, fix it, and really have to like help it. But then you have a nice open speed that you can make your adjustments with. And of course, you can also lock the camera in place when you want to have a certain angle fixed. To do these adjustments and to do them kind of like nicely, they also integrated this rod right here for these adjustments and made it so that you can actually extend it and you can kind of push it closed. And of course also, as you've seen in the beginning, you can actually take this, technically you can take it off by just unscrewing this thing right here, and then you don't have to use it at all. But the best part is you can also kind of tuck it away and make it so that it is kind of just part of the tripod and it's not always just sticking out massively. So just a little bit of a little movement right there. You can fix it in place and then you twist this, extend it, and you have your nice fluid head adjustments. Open up the top adjustments and you have a nice movement right there for those panning shots. It's really quite remarkable, and I didn't know what I was missing before having access to this. Now, working our way up to the top part, you have a locking mechanism right here with the base plate just going in like this and then pushing it down, and then it immediately locks into place. And of course, you can kind of unlock it just halfway and then slide the camera back and forth so you can actually adjust where the weight is distributed and how the camera behaves for the fluid head specifically, whether it goes level when you leave this alone or if it actually tilts down or tilts up slightly. You can unlock it completely and then you can take out the camera, but this here is actually also not the base plate that came with it. The reason why I have this base plate on my camera is, number one, I already placed a base plate on here where I can also remove the camera and just have my Arca Swiss. As I've mentioned, I'm mostly coming from a point of photography, and Arca Swiss plates are very normal there. But the second thing is that this here is actually my base plate for the Scientech gimbal. And that is a game changer to be able to have the same base plate of a Scientech gimbal, also the same base plate of a DJI gimbal, and having this standard Manfrotto plate that you can kind of switch between all of these things. So it's really nice. They also made an adjustment right here for the RS2 to RS4 DJI base plates. You can actually have like a little switch right here. So you can have this intercompatibility between these different devices. So you don't have to worry about needing multiple base plates on your camera. So you can switch immediately from the DJI gimbal to this monopod and get all of those different shots. Now, talking about intercompatibility, you can actually also completely unscrew the head right here. And what you will be revealed with, there's just a self-adjusting screw for different ball heads, cameras, or different tripod heads. And of course, the opportunity and possibility to also just screw in your gimbal, for example. So you could actually just take your gimbal, screw it on top of here, and then you have your gimbal directly attached to this monopod. You can do those shots of a panning gimbal move and so on. You have that flexibility. It is, of course, not fixed to the fluid head or whatever other head you get in the package with your COMAN M1. But of course, I can see if you're getting this in the package, you will probably want to use this setup with the pre-configured head on top. Now we have it all back together, but there's actually one more trick. The height adjustability is amazing. You can actually go super high. As you can see, I'm literally not able to look through the viewfinder right now. It goes up to 1.75 meters. That's the official spec. But with my camera mounted on the base plate that has this adapter thing, and of course the camera itself, I am about 1.82 meters. This thing has me questioning my own height because, I don't know, shouldn't I be able to look through this when it is fully extended? I'm not sure. But you can see the height of this is massive, and like it's crazy that you can just adjust this with this one lever right here. Now, if I go all the way down, you can see the height is still significant. And if you really want to, you might actually want to go a little bit lower than that. But how would you do that? Well, COMAN has thought about that. They put in a quick release right here. You can take off the full head, including a special proprietary connection mechanism, or at least I haven't seen anything like it before. And you have the same adjustability or the same connector on the base plate. You can take out the complete monopod. And with that, you have your feet, you have your head, and you can connect them together so that you have about a 27 centimeter or so. I will have the number exactly on the screen. And you can have this, just set it down on the floor, wherever you want to be filming, and you have an opportunity to do so. Super detailed, super nice, and with a push of a button. Literally, you can just push the button right there. We take the monopod again, we place it in there, have it connected, and we connect the top, and you're super speedy back to the height. So that is, I think, one of the biggest selling points here. It's the height adjustability. You can do so with one hand. You literally don't need the second hand at all for this opportunity. And it's just marvelous what they packed in this form factor and the ease of use. The fluid head functions wonderfully and has been a nice joy to use here. I didn't know what I was missing without having access to a fluid head, so that's a nice surprise for myself. And now with this run through of the features and the opportunities that this presents, I'm going to give you a couple more of the details. In this configuration, the M1 Pro V5 has a minimum height of 76 centimeters. That is with the legs opened up on the ground, it's just standing there up to the fluid head base plate. It has a maximum height of 175 centimeters. And now in terms of weight, this is not very light. It's advertised as 2.494 kilograms. I weighed it in at 2.52 kilograms, and that comes together not just because of the fluid head, because that was my thought initially. The fluid head itself, without the quick release here, is 800 grams. Then you have the base on the bottom, which is 660 grams. So those are basically just the quick release mechanics on the bottom right here, including the metal feet. And then you have the center column pretty much exactly at 1 kilogram. That is some serious business, if you ask me, because the usual carbon fiber tripods that I travel with weigh around 1 kilogram for the legs, and then maybe a couple 100 grams for the fluid head at the top. So that is definitely something that I would consider if you are thinking about bringing this onto a longer hike. The maximum weight that they're saying you can load this with is about 5 kilograms, and I've not tested this because the Canon R5C and the 15-35 2.8 is probably the heaviest combination that I have, maybe with an Atomos monitor on top, and that was definitely easy to handle for this COMAN monopod. It had no problems whatsoever, and also, of course, with the fluid head, it had no issues with that type of weight. But if you put a much heavier system on there, you're probably earlier going to have the problem with just the thing tipping over and you having to be much more careful with that. If you have a little bit of a lighter setup on top of here, like the Canon EOS R, with in this case the 35 1.8, then the holding of the whole setup and standing still is probably much less of an issue. Something I also appreciate about the way that this comes is that it has this packaging, and you can actually have this as a sling bag over your shoulder to transport this monopod. And it also comes with these inside pouches, and there are 2 of them. They're zipped close with 1 zipper, and that is great to transport, for example, the center rod extension with the spike. And of course, also what they come with, all of the Allen keys that you can make all of the adjustments and fix any of the Allen screws that might be any loose or need adjusting. The top quick release plate, by the way, also comes with its own Allen key, which is held in place by magnets, so that you don't ever have to worry about not being able to unscrew the bottom plate from your camera if you ever need to do that, or of course, when you want to fix the bottom plate to a camera that hasn't been fixed there yet. The screw also is protected from falling out with this little rubber thingy so that you can take it out easily, but it's not going to just fall out based on the way that it is mounted in here. Now that was my overview. Now, are there any cons to this thing? I've mentioned it before, it is relatively heavy, at least from what I am used to in the world of tripods. It does, however, have a fluid head, which is quite amazing. This thing here, it has a nice handle, and you can kind of strap it so that you don't lose the whole thing out of your hand and it falls down. That is nice, but based on my knowledge, it's impossible to take off, and it has a little bit of a metallic sound to it, which might be rather annoying for some people, and I don't know if that was the best idea here. I'm not sure, maybe they can fix this in the process of the Kickstarter campaign, so that this is not the case that way that it is currently, because I think especially for videographers and based on the fluid head, it's basically meant for videographers. It shouldn't really make any sounds like that. That is really annoying. And then the last thing about the fluid head, I think there could be maybe some improvements, because the bottom adjustment right here for the rotation basically only locks in place, and then it actually locks in place with little ball bearings, so that you can kind of feel that it has a little bit of play, and you can't really make this a smooth transition. So you can unlock it, and it is a nice and smooth transition, or a nice and smooth feeling, but it's not really something where you can decide how much of a dampening you want. And the top adjustment for the tilt basically has a similar situation. You can a little bit adjust the strength of the fluidity, but generally speaking, it's mostly a either lock in place and no movement, or you kind of like have to kind of like push it. But then once you open it up, it just still has this adjustment push, and you can open up the screw all the way. You can't really unlock this more, but then you still have to push to make the movement happen. So it's never actually going to be as easy to move as it would, for example, be for a ball head. So that is something to be aware of. The adjustments up here is nice. The fluidity, it feels great for doing those panning shots that you want. But in comparison to other fluid heads, there might have been an opportunity to give a little more of a adjustability of that dampening. Now, with that said, I hope this video was helpful for you to get to know the COMAN M1 Pro V5 fluid head and monopod. And now you can check out the Kickstarter campaign with a link in the description below. And of course, once the Kickstarter campaign ends, I will link the official storefront. If you have any questions about this product, of course, you can leave those in the comment section down below. I'm going to try to give you an answer about what I have experienced with this there. And if you have specific questions for the manufacturers, please reach out on the Kickstarter page so that they might be able to help you with their information. Now, with all that said, I hope you have an amazing day. Make it your life, go out there and shoot more, and I will see you in the next video.